Last time on One Piece First Impressions. Boobs! My one weakness! Hey, you want to hear a story? Humans suck! But also, maybe not? I'm dead now. Let's live under the sun! Fishmen and humans can get along! Oh crap! I'm dead now too! It's finally time to get down to business and start punching some fishies in their gills. Hello, and welcome to my review and reaction to the second half of the Fishman Island arc. I have a ton to talk about in this video, so I'm very glad I split my coverage of this arc in two. Otherwise, I'd really be struggling to keep my first impressions concise and yet cover everything that I think is important to this extremely thematic arc. If you missed my previous video, the link is in the description. Right off the top, I have to say that the Fishman Island arc is really not what I was expecting when we first found out about it in post-Enies Lobby, but honestly, I think that's a credit to Oda's storytelling ability because the time we finally arrived, everything was set up perfectly for the story that he told here. While this arc isn't the strongest for me, it was hard to follow up the Summit War saga, and I think this arc's greatest strength is the unique direction Oda takes the story in. So, without further ado, let's sail onward to the battle that will shape the fate of Fishman Island. Unfortunately, where we pick up is one of the weakest sections of this whole arc for me. Hordy Jones gets on the TV and starts expounding upon his evil plan, reminding everyone that fishmen should hate humans, and saying he's gonna execute King Neptune in 3 hours. Right away, this set me off. Another arc with an arbitrary waiting time for an execution that gives our heroes all the time in the world to save the day. It's later explained that Hordy did this to lure out the princes and Shirahoshi, but I also think that's kind of dumb. He had a camera for the whole island to see. Arguably, more people would have seen Neptune executed if he did it right then and there. Then, with control over Fishman Island, Hordy and his crew could have easily tracked down the 3 princes and the enormous princess without setting some elaborate trap that was destined to blow up in their faces. But let's move on to something else that irritated me: Luffy and Jinbei fighting. This fight, if you can even call it that, gave me serious Luffy and Zoro battling in Whiskey Peak vibes. It just felt very forced, with Jinbei trying to stop Luffy from saving his friends in the kingdom, but without ever just spitting out his thoughts as to why or an alternative plan. Luffy would move, Jinbei would say wait, they'd hit each other, and repeat. Pretty boring and annoying, especially because I get the sense that this encounter of them just snarling at each other across 2 episodes was dragged out by the anime. This confrontation does pay off later, but I will get to that. And finally, the last bit of setup before everyone unites is Hordy's horrible opioid addiction, another victim of Big Pharma's cruelty. So, Hordy Jones has been sucking down energy steroids like it's no one's business, and straight up, I really don't like this idea of a magic pill that gives you a power boost. Seems very random, however, I could get over that idea if it was implemented in an interesting way. Unfortunately, it is not. In fact, not only do these pills give power boosts, but if you choke down an ungodly amount, you also unlock transformations. Trying to suppress the pain of the nasty cut Zoro gave him, Hordy just eats a handful of his infinite pill supply and turns into a ripped grandma. I hate to pile on so early in this review, because the arc does get better, but what the fuck is this? Hordy's design to start with didn't look too great, but this is just silly. It honestly felt like Oda just got sick of drawing Hordy's little hat and wanted to get rid of it. So, Hordy takes Neptune to the Giancourt Plaza to patiently wait a few hours before executing him. Not to worry though, the princes are here to save the day. Oh, okay, never mind. Well, at least Jinbei and Shirahoshi are heading over to help out. Oh, they swam into a big net and got captured. Sick. This is going great. Let me rewind a bit. So before Jinbei is captured, we see him supposedly recovering from his battle with Luffy, and it's heavily implied he beat the Straw Hats and headed to face Hordy on his own. I thought it was weird we didn't see the fight after all that, but I was sure we'd get some explanation later. But when Jinbei got captured so quickly, my first impression was that Jinbei's character was being absolutely decimated before my eyes. A big net? Big time yikes. Once again though, we shall get back to this point. Before we get to the good shit, we get a bit more information to help us set the stage before the coming battle. First off, we find out that Hordy has 100,000 outlaws under his control in the plaza, ready to fight. There are 70,000 fishmen from the Fishman district, and then 30,000 human slaves he's collected over the last month. This seems like an insane amount of travelers to the Fishman Island to me, and that's assuming he's captured every single human in that time frame. But hey, I guess we needed a full 100,000 warriors to fight against for the sake of the arc. Hordy then begins to taunt a captured Shirahoshi, who everyone knows has the power to communicate with Sea Kings, which is the entire reason Hordy captured her in the first place, and he really rips into her and begins shitting all over the legacy of her mother. Eventually, he reveals that he was the one who killed Queen Odahime, which surprises everyone except the audience and Shirahoshi, who knew this whole time. The first question I had after watching the scene was if Hordy was purposely trying to get Shirahoshi to use her powers, or if he was just a full-blown moron who had to keep stating the same fact in 5 different ways without anticipating she could destroy him in an instant. The latter seems to be the answer. The second question I had was, did Megalo totally fuck everything up? Let me explain. So the reason Shirahoshi wasn't shocked by this Hordy murdering her mother reveal is because Megalo saw the whole thing while in the service of the royal army. After leaving the army and becoming Shirahoshi's pet, Megalo told her, and only her, the whole story. I assume Megalo can talk to all fish folk, so this really makes no sense at all. Don't get me wrong, I understand why Shirahoshi herself would keep this a secret, but why the hell would Megalo? Hordy himself calls out the shark for how fucking stupid he was in this scenario, and he's totally correct. All he needed to do was just shout, and people would have seen what was up. Hate to say it, but the events of this arc are low-key all Megalo's fault. Megalo is the biggest villain in One Piece confirmed. I should also say that there is a massive number of Fishman civilians positioned around the plaza watching everything go down, and as a collective force, they are essentially a character for the rest of this arc. Among them is Madame Charlie, who begins to taunt Hordy in a way that I felt was quite clever. She tells Hordy that he will not be the one to destroy Fishman Island, but it will be Straw Hat Luffy, which infuriates him. I thought it was a nice touch to throw Hordy off balance and have a chip on his shoulder about Luffy. Hordy, in his infinite wisdom, states that Madame Charlie's previsions were always accurate, but this time it's bullshit. The final words of an absolute idiot. We also get a reveal that Charlie is Arlong's sister, which seems like a big and important reveal, but it's entirely meaningless for the rest of this arc. Now, with the civilians fearing the horrors that Hordy will bring upon the island, they begin to cheer for Luffy to arrive and fulfill the prophecy. They are clamoring for Straw Hat to destroy the island and save them from Hordy Jones. I was harsh on the existence of this prophecy in my last video, but I have to admit that this cheering was fun and made that setup worthwhile. And, as if summoned by the islanders themselves, Luffy bursts forth from Megalo's stomach and absolutely fucking clobbers Hordy as he's about to execute Neptune. I did not see that coming at all. So let's rewind to pick up on all those threads I said I'd get back to. With this reveal, everything makes so much more sense. The weird off-screen conclusion of Jinbei and Luffy's fight, and Jinbei getting caught like an absolute dunce, were all part of the plan. Thank God. Honestly, I had almost lost so much faith in Jinbei before this reveal, but this was a big redemption for him. You had me again, Oda, you wily son of a bitch. So, we flash back to see that Jinbei purposely orchestrated everything to go down like this, so the Straw Hats didn't go to face Hordy guns blazing and come off like human bullies. Instead, now they come off like friendly heroes, which was clever on Jinbei's part. But this idea of being a hero is something that Luffy hardcore resists, which I love him for. He insists that he isn't a selfless hero. While he likes heroes, he himself is a pirate who indulges in his own selfish desires. In the present day, the Fishman civilians ask if Luffy is a friend or a foe, and he repeats the line he told Shirahoshi when they first met and she asked him if he was good or bad. You have to decide that for yourself. This arc is really focusing on how Luffy sees himself and how he feels about how others see him. By extension, this carried over to the rest of the Straw Hats, but it's primarily focused on Luffy. He desperately doesn't want to be a hero, but a self-indulgent and greedy pirate who wants everything for himself. I'd just like to say that I really appreciate this idea being tackled within this arc. It was a nice reminder that while Luffy may be on this romantic adventure, doing heroic things, he is at his heart a selfish person. His selfishness just so happens to come from a kind-hearted place. Anyway, so all the Straw Hats arrive in the plaza as was the plan, with Zoro, Usopp, and Brook flying in with Sanji and Frankie on the Thousand Sunny after they were saved from their imprisonment in the palace. They all take a brief moment to reflect on Shirahoshi not being as much of a massive coward as everyone expected, since she clung onto the secret about who killed her mother, bearing that burden alone to stop the spread of hatred that her mother asked her to do with her final words. In that way, Shirahoshi is an extension of both Orihime and Tiger's wills. After this, we get back to some villain monologue, and I'm really holding back on talking about Hordy for now, but this moment in particular really rubbed me the wrong way, and I have to say something. With the Straw Hats about to kick some ass, Hordy talks and talks about how cool and successful he's going to be. But then he randomly claims that he's going to be the king of the pirates, and that felt so forced. That is clearly not Hordy's goal at all, so it makes no sense that he'd suddenly be saying this. It seems to me that the only reason Hordy said anything about being king of the pirates is because there was a lack of confidence in him as a main villain, and a need was felt to put him in more direct opposition to Luffy, but that was entirely unnecessary. Luffy already had plenty of reason to fight this guy. He's been trying to kick his ass for a while, even before this whole king nonsense, and it never even goes anywhere for the rest of the arc. I'm really focusing on one line here, but I think it's emblematic of a larger problem with Hordy that I will talk to later on in this review. For now, let's get to the battle already. It's the Straw Hat Pirates versus an army of 100,000 Fishmen soldiers. This is by far the biggest battle that the crew has been involved with to date, and while I was never once worried at all that the Straw Hats would be overwhelmed by these forces, it was nice to see the scale of the conflict increase, since really the last time the Straw Hats went against an enemy army was at Enies Lobby. Now, as the big dick captain ready to flaunt his 2 years of training, Luffy immediately takes out half of these forces with one hockey blast, which was absolutely nuts. But I guess that's just something Luffy can do now, since he's practically a god compared to everyone else on his crew. Although, the rest of the crew does get some time to flaunt their stuff during this battle, so I'd like to take some time to talk about them before moving on. Backtracking a little bit, we saw in the palace that Brook's soul can move separate from his body, and I loved this idea because it gives Brook some unique abilities from his devil fruit rather than just being a guy who came back as a skeleton. We also see that he can cast illusions with his music on his enemies, which is connected to the strength of his soul or something. I don't know. I mean, Brook doesn't really make much sense if you think about him too long, and that's perfectly alright because he's a delightful cartoon character who I love. I think these powers were a great way to differentiate him from just being another guy with a sword on the crew, because that's kinda Zoro's whole thing. Speaking of Zoro, he's maybe the one person on this crew who doesn't get a big show-off of any new abilities, at least none that I can remember. He just seems to be way more powerful, but still operating within his standard skill set of nonsensical sword attacks. Robin has also got an incredible power upgrade that we have seen some snippets of before now, but they really take center stage in this battle. First of all, we see multiple examples of her fully cloning her whole body, which I really like from her, but the big thing that Robin can do now is generate massive versions of her limbs, which is both hilarious and terrifying. In the same vein, Chopper gets a great upgrade to his existing power set by having more refined transformations, additional transformations like his Kung Fu form, but now he can also transform into his monster form at will and control it for 3 minutes. While it isn't focused on too much here, that's actually a huge deal, as now Chopper is probably the most physically powerful behind Luffy for that short period of time. That information with Chopper mostly comes later on though. During this early section of the battle, Chopper serves as a commander for the Straw Hats' upgraded arsenal, and goddamn does he serve proudly. It's clear that Frankie has not wasted his time over the last 2 years. Not only did he upgrade himself, but he built some serious hardware for the crew to use in battle. He's added a beefed up motorcycle and a tank to the Sunny's docking station, and most importantly, he finally styles his hair back to his classic pompadour for this battle, and I think it looks so good this way. I really wish this was his default hair. Anyway, when the cycle and tank don't work out, Franky combines the two for his ultimate weapon, the Iron Pirate. This is just a big robot that Franky operates from the inside that looks exactly like him, hence the nickname General Franky. Yet, in typical Franky fashion, the Iron Pirate is pretty much a big useless shell that looks hella cool, while all the major attacks come from Franky sitting in the cockpit. I thought this was really interesting because I just read an interview between Akira Toriyama and Oda, featured in Oda's 2005 Color Walk Art Book Volume 1, where Oda praises Toriyama's artwork during a conversation about mecha design, and then states, "I have no idea about machines at all, so I can't draw them." In this conversation, Oda also mentions a mecha design that Toriyama did where 3 mechas combined into one, which he found amazing. So I think it's pretty funny that only 5 or so years later, Oda took his own crack at some combining mechas, and hey, I think it looks pretty damn good. He's too hard on himself. If you want to read that full interview, which I think is pretty interesting, I'll link to a fan site in the description. Anyway, so Nami and Usopp really don't have too much going on during this battle. Nami's just using her weather abilities, but she doesn't get any big moment, while Usopp mainly shows off that he really has gotten over his cowardly ways. He operates his plant slingshot attacks. There is some variety, but I do kinda wish he'd mix it up a bit. I think the plant attacks are cool, but for them to be his only kind of attack still feels off to me. I think I'd like them a lot better if they were used more sparingly. And finally, the character who has probably the most significant power upgrade is Sanji. He can now do the moonwalk like the CP9 crew, which means our leggy boy can essentially fly. This was the perfect upgrade for Sanji. It fits with his power set and skills, but now gives him a significant differentiator in combat from anyone else. Zoro and Sanji have always felt somewhat interchangeable in a big battle like this, but giving Sanji the high ground puts him in a unique position amongst the crew. During this fight, he also begins to shoot out like rainbow comet attacks from his feet, so this guy has really gotten some nice power upgrades that I'm loving. Meanwhile, Luffy is making Hordy Jones look like a little bitch. During the chaos, Hordy summons the Kraken to join the fight. He uses the Kraken as a slave, who he has blackmailed, but that immediately backfires on him since the Kraken and Luffy have a connection, which was too funny. With the Kraken on the Straw Hat's side, the battle really isn't going Hordy's way at all, because Luffy also begins to fully whoop his ass with his hardening ability. So this was seen earlier in the arc, and I really had no idea what was going on, but now Luffy refers to his hardening as an extension of his armament haki, and there seems to be very little drawback to using this ability. Let me know, is this a permanent upgrade that he can do anytime he wants? I guess we don't know too much about haki as an audience yet, but I'd imagine there has to be a stamina drain or something so Luffy can't use hardening 24/7. Either way, with all these displays of power, and Hordy on his ass for most of this fight, things seemed like they would be wrapped up pretty quickly. That is, until a massive, ancient ship came rocketing toward the entire island. This brings me back around to Vanderdecken. You remember this four-legged fuck, right? Well, by this point in the story, it has become pretty apparent that he is going to be one of the lamest villains the series has ever done. But when he's steaming over Shirahoshi denying him, he decides to use his devil fruit powers to throw the Noah at her, a massive, ancient ship that she can't possibly escape from, which will also destroy the entire Fishman Island. This is a really unique threat, but I think Vanderdecken exists as more of a plot device than a character. His motivation is borderline nonsensical, and he's suddenly willing to kill hundreds of thousands of people for just a weird obsession he has. He really just exists to drive the plot forward with this Noah attack, which is kind of disappointing. So Shirahoshi takes to the skies after she realizes what this Noah assault is all about, in order to lead the Noah away from Fishman Island to save everybody. Hordy chases after Shirahoshi and boards the Noah, planning to exact his revenge on Vanderdecken while he's at it, and of course, Luffy goes after them all, leaving the Straw Hats to handle the battle themselves. I think that having Luffy chase Shirahoshi into the water was a great way to set up round 2 of the Luffy and Hordy battle. In the water, Hordy has the clear advantage, and he pretty much immediately takes Luffy down. He definitely would have died without the aid of Prince Fukaboshi. This is really when Hordy becomes a threat, because in the plaza, he stood absolutely zero chance against Luffy. So, while Luffy and Fukaboshi come up with a plan to defeat Hordy, Hordy makes his move on the deck of the Noah. Vanderdecken sees Hordy and greets him as if he wasn't just about to kill him and all of his men with the ship. Hordy stabs Vanderdecken, attempting to kill him so that his powers stop working while the Noah is directly over Fishman Island so that it will stop following Shirahoshi and fall back down, because apparently now Hordy just wants to destroy the island and kill all his men. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But before we do, I just want to say that this falling Noah plan never really felt like it had any stakes, because we know that Shirahoshi is the chosen one who can speak to Sea Kings. It was quite obvious from the jump that somehow she'd save the day. Don't you go thinking I forgot about that massive Chekhov's gun. So, with the Noah falling, let's take a brief trip back to the ground before I finally get into Hordy's backstory and my opinions on him as a villain. The battle with the Straw Hats transitions to a new stage, with everyone getting paired off against one of the new Fishmen pirate officers. Well, everyone except Nami, which is total bullshit. Nami literally gets called the weakest link by some fuck, and then when everyone else pairs off to fight an officer, she is just matched up with random goons. She's getting a really bad showing in this fight, which is deeply upsetting because based on how she acted earlier in the story, I figured this was going to be a really important arc for her character. In my last video, I even talked about how perfectly things were set up in this arc for Nami to get some much needed development. Well, she's essentially become utterly superfluous after the Jinbei backstory, to the point where she doesn't even get a somewhat interesting battle like everyone else. Sure, she electrocutes some people here and there, but she couldn't get one of these motherfucking chump-ass officers to fight? What the hell is the deal here? I call bullshit on this whole thing. This arc squandered Nami's potential more so than any other story in the series thus far. Honestly, all of these battles felt very surface level, bland, and mandatory, as if the narrative was nowhere near as interested in these battles as what was going on with Luffy, and that makes for an overall subpar experience. The one Fishman officer I was interested in from the beginning was Haozu, because he was like a hired hand who didn't really care about the cause. But then his character just turns into a guy who likes to cut people, because that's funny, I guess. He then got the stupid energy steroid overdose red-eyed upgrade like everyone else, and went on an even crazier rampage to the point where I couldn't have been less interested in him as a character. By the time he went to fight Zoro, he had become a parody of himself. All of the fights really aren't that entertaining. The most interesting parts weren't the character conflicts themselves, but the Straw Hats just showing off their new abilities, which I already covered. The one fight that I did enjoy was Brook's battle with Zio. Not only do we get another cool Brook ability, which is his badass frozen sword attack that's powered by the chill of the afterlife or whatever, but they actually have some semblance of a philosophical conflict. The comedy that both of these characters utilize goes together very well, but their different views on death is what makes the conflict work. While Zio claims the deaths of his men will be worth it for their holy mission, Brook fights back and says that as someone who has faced death before, it should not be treated so lightly. It isn't the most in-depth conflict, but it's way more than anyone else had to offer during this section. And Zio's worldview finally brings me back to talking about who Hordy Jones is. Back in the waters above Fishman Island, Hordy Jones swallows another mouthful of energy steroids and rages out, transforming once again, this time into a more bulked up form, and he takes down Prince Fukaboshi by giving him a good old-fashioned stabby. Gut-wrenching stab wounds mean literally nothing to these characters though, so I was not worried about the prince, but this is where someone finally asks, "Oh, hey Hordy! What's your fucking deal?" Of course, the story mutes Hordy's answer and only shows Fukaboshi's reaction, but we're living in the metaverse now, so story structure doesn't apply to us. When asked what humans did to him, Hordy dramatically replies, "Nothing." And I knew he was gonna say that. Now, I know you have no reason to believe me at all, but you just have to trust me. For some reason, when Hordy's answer was silenced, it clicked in me that he wasn't going to have a really good personal reason to justify his behavior, because it just fits the theme of this story. When describing the truth of Hordy to Luffy, and the entirety of Fishman Island, Fukaboshi says that the new Fishman pirates' hatred is not rooted in their experience or their true beliefs. They lack substance, they are empty. Now, I thought this idea was actually pretty powerful. It's much more interesting to have the main villain not have some overly tragic shonen backstory, which gives the audience no choice but to sympathize with him. Instead, we are shown that Hordy Jones and his friends, grew up in a society that idealized heroes and the problems that come with raising up the wrong kinds of heroes. During Hordy's youth, the Fishmen, in their rightful anger, held up horribly violent men like Arlong as heroes, which only solidified their values in the next generation who were more inclined to look up to heroes. It is through this hero worship that Hordy grew to hate humans because it was constantly instilled in him by those he looked up to, and eventually he became far worse than Arlong ever was. While Arlong was a bad dude, we are told that he never harmed a fishman, but we see multiple examples in the present and the past of Hordy not abiding by that rule. Hordy has taken the hatred perpetuated by those who came before him and bastardized it to the point of near racial self-destruction without any personal drive other than the foolish belief that he is carrying on some righteous anger that can never be allowed to die out. Now, all of that sounds like the makings of a really interesting villain, and I do really appreciate the backstory and motivation for Hordy, but I think this came way too late. Hordy's characterization throughout the arc is all over the place, so it was hard to feel impacted by this backstory. So Hordy's motivations before this backstory seem to be that he just wants to stop the Fishmen from relocating closer to the humans and to disgrace the memory of Queen Orihime. He is willing to launch a coup of his own nation and overthrow the king in order to enforce his own beliefs over his people. Fair enough. Then, when Luffy arrives to fight him, Hordy suddenly claims that he also wants to be king of the pirates, which doesn't fit with his previous plan and is never mentioned again. After this, Hordy suddenly decides that he wants to use the Noah to destroy Fishman Island and kill all of the people there. Doesn't that seem like a really drastic turn for this character to make? Then, Hordy tells Fukaboshi that he and his crew were appointed by heaven to punish humans. They literally are now a weird cult that believe they are on a holy crusade. In the backstory on Hordy, we see that Arlong refers to his revenge against the humans as a crusade, so it's retcon that Hordy is taking on Arlong's mantle of leading this religious war, but why wasn't this consistent throughout the arc? Oh, also, in that flashback, we see that the new Fishmen pirates essentially formed their own KKK to attack fishmen who are sympathetic to humans. These guys are all over the place. So, while I have no problem with any of Hordy's motivations and goals, except being king of the pirates, the dude could never pick one, and so he seems extremely inconsistent throughout this arc. If you wanted Hordy to be this misguided holy warrior, I think that's awesome and unique, but it should have been included from the start and not in the final act of the battle. That is all to say that while I was really looking forward to what Hordy could bring to the story, ultimately, he and his crew just feel like a bunch of generic lunatics who could fit into whatever mold the story wants for them at any time. And if characters feel like they are changing motivations pretty often, then they don't feel like strong characters. At least, not to me. While I appreciate the idea of hero worship corrupting youth, and how well tied in that is to the themes established by Queen Orihime, I think how Hordy was handled in general was pretty disappointing. He's one of the worst overarching villains in the series yet. After this reveal, Prince Fukaboshi believes that the hatred that has consumed the Fishmen needs to be reset so that their people can heal and finally move forward. He wants Luffy to bring Fishman Island back to zero, to destroy their history, which has built up this horrible grudge and rotted the society so thoroughly that it threatens to destroy itself. Luffy declares that he will protect the island and everyone. That's why he spent the last 2 years training. For an instant, we see a flash of Ace overlaid on top of Luffy, and then he hits Hordy with his new Red Hawk attack. This thing is crazy. It seems to be some combination of second gear and armament hockey, which can even somehow ignite his arm while he's underwater. Seems a bit odd to me, but whatever. It was a badass moment. Luffy sends Hordy crashing into the Noah, which now has a giant bubble around it thanks to the help of some fishmen soldiers, and so Luffy can finally battle in his element. And once again, Hordy just pumps himself full of steroids to get a strength boost. This is such annoying writing. I'm sorry, but it feels so lazy. He just has all of these steroids. The dude is choking down 50 at a time. Where is he keeping them all? Can literally anyone just do what he's doing and keep eating them infinitely to keep getting stronger? Obviously, there is a cost later on, but in the moment, why is he even holding back from just eating every single one that he has? It's also just a really boring way to power up. Do drugs to get tough. Anyway, the fight doesn't last very long. Hordy gets one solid bite in on Luffy's neck, but then Luffy just obliterates this fuck with his elephant Gatling gun, and he's knocked out cold. Luffy isn't done though. He begins pounding into the Noah itself, attempting to shatter the massive ship to pieces before it can crash into Fishman Island. This is a really fun visual, but just as predicted, Shirahoshi summons the Sea Kings, who snag the Noah in mid-fall so that Luffy doesn't have to destroy it any longer. Luffy passes out, and we get a brief conversation between Shirahoshi and the newly arrived giant fish monsters. So it turns out that Shirahoshi is the queen of the Sea Kings, and that the Noah was actually built for them to drag around. For what purpose? It's not made clear yet. But while the Sea Kings are moving the Noah back to the Sea Forest, they comment that they think Luffy was able to hear them speak, which no one but Shirahoshi should be able to do. "But remember that one time?" says a Sea King, brain-dead horny for filling in as this arc's mandatory role of comparing Luffy to Roger. Yes, we find out that in the past, Gold Roger also heard the Sea Kings mumbling around. Whoa, it's almost like Luffy and Gold Roger share some unique qualities. Huh. Luffy is badly injured and needs a blood transplant, but as was established earlier in this arc, sharing blood between humans and fishmen is taboo, and there is an unwillingness to do so from the citizens. However, Jinbei steps up to provide his blood. This was a nice moment for Jinbei, although I do have a hard time believing that none of these fishmen, who spent the last 20 episodes cheering for Luffy, wouldn't be willing to give the savior of their kingdom their blood. During this blood transfusion, the narrator comes in to pretty blatantly lay out the theme of this arc, and I thought that was odd. I don't think the narrator has ever jumped in to tell us the moral of the story before, and I don't hate it. I think the monologue is actually pretty good, but I wonder why that is. It almost felt like the story didn't trust the audience to get the message it was trying to present. So, lacking all subtlety, the story tells us that Luffy and Jinbei sharing blood is the first step toward a new relationship for both races united under the sun, and the prince proclaims that Luffy has reset Fishman Island back to 0. Overall, I really appreciated the message of the Fishman Island arc. It was a bold move to try and tackle racism in an arc about dumb pirates traveling to an undersea wonderland, but for the most part, I think Oda pulled it off successfully. While I think that Hordy Jones was handled pretty sloppily, he did fill his role well enough for the other thematic elements to work. The story successfully makes its point that the best way to root out bigotry is through exposing the next generation to other races rather than instilling in them a sense of hatred from a young age, which creates a never-ending cycle of societal rot. I do think it's a bit odd that the story focuses so much on how horrible humans are to fishmen, but then the lesson of the story is really just for fishmen to get over it because some humans are cool, while no human actually learns an equivalent lesson in this story. But I get it. There really aren't any humans around, and I guess Oda didn't want to make one of his main characters racist and then learn the error of their ways by the end. Although, I do think that would have been a great arc for Nami's character. All in all, this is the most heavy-handed theme of One Piece so far, but I didn't feel it was preachy or completely out of nowhere. It was set up well for the last few arcs, and delivered in a satisfying enough way that got me to care about the characters involved. Oh hey, and Jinbei's joining the crew? Yup. Luffy asks Jinbei to join the Straw Hat Pirates, and while he would like to join, he puts his invitation on pause, saying that he's honor-bound to fulfill his previous duties, but when he finishes, he will find them and join if they'll still have him. Honestly, I was not expecting this. Jinbei just seems way too established in the pirate world for me to even consider that he'd join up, and I do like that he wants to, but he has to get some other stuff done first. He isn't in a position to just up and leave, and that makes for a really interesting dynamic with an honorary member of the crew elsewhere waiting in the wings to show up and help out. So, after everyone is healed up, we get a Straw Hat party, baby. It's been way too long since a good old-fashioned post-battle celebration. Thriller Bark was more of a dinner party, while post-Enies Lobby was the last real hoedown. Unfortunately, this is probably the lamest party they've ever had. While on paper, I think them being the guests of honor for a massive concert where they are being provided unlimited food and drink was cool, the actual direction of the episode was ass. It felt way too flat and contained. It felt extremely low energy. But this party gives Robin a chance to speak with King Neptune alone, and we get some real juicy info. If you need a refresher, earlier in the arc, Robin found a poneglyph in the Sea Forest written by a man named Joy Boy. Absolutely sick name, by the way. Robin brings up the poneglyph to Neptune and asks what Joy Boy was apologizing about. Turns out, He was apologizing to the princess of the kingdom, the last princess who had Shirahoshi's abilities, who went by the name of Poseidon. Shirahoshi is one of the ancient weapons we've heard so much about. I really was not expecting a person to be one of the ancient weapons, so this was a huge surprise to me, but it makes sense and was an awesome reveal. Robin and Neptune agree to keep this information private because it would be bad news if literally anyone found out about it. And you gotta be kidding me. This swamp fuck stole all the royal treasure, and now he's the one to find out that Shirahoshi is the ancient weapon? Fuck me! Yes, Caribou. The disgusting, floppy-sleeved freak is back in the action after everything that's happened. God damn, do I hate his face. Caribou goes to kidnap Shirahoshi after hearing this news and is easily launched out of the palace by Luffy. We also see that Hordy and his crew all rapidly aged as an after effect of their energy steroid usage, which was not a surprise since that consequence was established early on. The only thing this does for me is show that Hordy will never be a threat again. And with that, all the events of the Fishman Island arc proper are wrapped up, and now we get a short section of extreme setup for what awaits the Straw Hats in the new world. Jinbei informs the Straw Hats of the broad stroke power shifts that have occurred in the 2-year time jump with both the Navy and the pirate world. The first thing we find out is that against Sengoku's recommendation, Aokiji is not the new fleet admiral, but Aokinu is. This isn't a major surprise, since Aokinu is clearly the more villainous figure, and from a storytelling perspective, it makes sense to make him an even greater threat. The biggest surprise here, though, is that Aokiji and Aokinu fought for the position, Aokiji lost, and then decided to flat out leave the Navy rather than work under Aokinu. That is extremely interesting to me. Not only does that mean there are 2 admiral positions to fill now, but it also means that Aokiji is just out there somewhere, unaffiliated with the world government. He has got to come into play in some very important way down the line, and I can't even imagine how yet. Also in Navy world, a little later on we see that Captain Smoker has now been promoted to Vice Admiral, and he's in the new world with Captain Tashigi, and of course, he's rocking a fat scar. Smoker captures the human slaves who escaped from Hordy's control and interrogates them, finding out about the commotion going on at Fishman Island, but before they even confirm to him who was involved, he already knows that it was the Straw Hats. God damn it. I love him. I'm assuming this means Smoker is going to be a big part of the next arc or saga, and I'm very much looking forward to that. The next big piece of news is that Blackbeard has already become one of the 4 emperors, replacing Whitebeard in that role and largely reconquering his established territory. Again, that's not much of a surprise, but the big twist is that apparently Blackbeard is hunting down Devil Fruit power holders to steal their abilities just like he did to Whitebeard. That's hugely horrible news. Not only does that put a target on the backs of half of the Straw Hat crew, but the implication here is that Blackbeard has been doing this for the past 2 years. How many has he already added to himself? Does he have to kill you to get your abilities? Can they be given back? So many questions, very exciting development. Back on Fishman Island, we also get some sweet developments with another one of the 4 emperors. Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro went looking for Caribou's limp body to retrieve the treasure he stole, and on their way back, they come across agents of Big Mom, here to collect their tax of candy from the fishmen. Unfortunately, the candy factory was destroyed in the battle, and also, they fed the remaining candy to the Straw Hats as part of their banquet. As you can expect, this turns into a Luffy-fueled shouting match between himself and Big Mom, directly via transponder snail. So classic. Is it pronounced Big Mom or Man? Please let me know. But anyway, the small glimpses we get of her really scared the shit out of me. She seems to be a rather gluttonous woman, possibly with acid saliva. I'm assuming she has some weird devil fruit ability going on, but regardless, Luffy shouts at her that he ate all of her candy, and that the fishmen are not at fault at all for failing to make their contribution to her. She sees through this, but accepts Luffy's offer to become her enemy. I thought this was perfect timing for a new overarching threat. With one of the 4 emperors already hunting the Straw Hats from the start, that could make for some really interesting experiences in the new world right away. It will provide more structure for this initial journey than when the Straw Hats first entered the Grand Line. Then, to top everything off, Luffy says that he is going to make the Fishman Island his territory over Big Mom's, and they won't have to pay him anything. Dude, yes. Luffy claiming some territory is really fucking brilliant and puts the Straw Hats in a new class of pirate. I don't know if this actually took place or if it's something for the future, but I love this idea. So Luffy gives Big Mom's goons the treasure that they collected as payment for the candy, but it's later revealed that the Minister of the Right placed a bomb in one of the pieces of treasure to ward off thieves, and now he and Neptune are freaking out that essentially the Straw Hats sent a bomb directly to Big Mom. They don't warn anyone though. The bomb was planted a long time ago. It probably doesn't even work anymore. Everything's gonna be fine. As the Straw Hats are about to leave to head to the New World, we get a small scene with Madame Charlie and Kami. Charlie reflects on her prophecy, the one where she saw Luffy destroying Fishman Island, which obviously didn't come to pass, and reflects that this will be a future event. We are told over and over that Charlie's visions are never wrong, and even though Charlie and Kami don't want to believe it will happen, now I believe it. That is not what I was expecting for this prophecy. I thought it'd be relevant for this arc and then done with, but Oda played me once again, and it's some nice foreshadowing for the future. If Luffy does take Fishman Island as his territory, I suspect this prophecy is somehow connected to that. Anyway, on the way out, the fishmen give Nami a new log pose that is for navigating the New World. This new design features 3 needles, because the New World is so insane and unpredictable that having 3 islands logged is the safest way to travel and also point you in the direction of danger. Finally, as they are departing, Shirahoshi tells Luffy to come back and see her again to take her to the surface world one day, so the Straw Hats all make a promise that they will return and take that journey with her. This is the second major promise they've made to return to someone, first Laboon and now Shirahoshi, and both of these promises take place on opposite sides of the Red Line. We have to see the Straw Hats do another pass through the Grand Line at some point. I don't know when or how or why, but the story can't just end the second they get the One Piece. Anyway, now it's to the New World, baby, where they hitch a ride with a pod of whales that look just like Laboon, which was a really nice touch to tie things back to the initial entrance to the Grand Line. And with that, the Fishman Island arc and saga comes to an end. Overall, I really like this arc. I don't think it's my favorite. I don't even think it's in my top 5. But One Piece has been pretty rock solid for the last couple arcs, so it has some stiff competition. Before I sign off, I did want to tell you that I'm going to be taking a small break from One Piece on the channel. More specifically, these first impressions videos. I do have another One Piece video coming in 2 weeks that I'm really excited about. It's something I haven't done before, so I'm curious how you'll all feel about it. But I'm going to be taking a break from these One Piece first impressions videos to temporarily focus on making my Attack on Titan series. If you've never seen the series, you can even watch along with me as I watch for the first time myself. Anyway, I just felt I owed you all an explanation as to why I won't be continuing with the Punk Hazard arc for a couple of months. But once that Attack on Titan series wraps up, I will be back guns blazing, so don't worry about that. If you're still around and you've enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and bonk the like button. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with all that said, and another way too long video under my belt, I'd just like to say thank you. You guys are fucking awesome, and I love this little community we've built here. I would not have the motivation to keep working on this channel if it wasn't for your support, so I truly appreciate it. Please consider checking out some of these other videos on your screen now. The recent viewer recommendations video was especially fun for me to make, and now, sweet princes and princesses, I'll finally shut up.